Kickstarter games tend to have a notorious stigma against them. There are examples of Kickstarter games that turned out great and others not so much. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, these kind of, backer-funded projects have put me off for the longest time. Why would I just give out money to something that may or may not come out, or even worse, something that may or may not even be good? It was a gamble that I didn't want to take for the longest time, but something caught my eye a few years ago. Now, some of you who have been following me since the beginning might actually remember this, but a few years ago, there was this little game called Indivisible that piqued my curiosity. I played the demo and I really enjoyed myself, but for one reason or another, this project was having a difficult time reaching its goal. For a good while, it seemed as if it wouldn't make it, so content creators like Nick on Planet Ripple, as well as myself, made content showing our support for the game, as well as a way to give us some much needed exposure. And sure enough, this game was able to reach its goal. I mean, shoot, they even surpassed it. Their goal originally was $1.5 million, but they were able to reach $2.2 million. This allowed the developers to include a 2D animated intro for the main cast of characters to be fully voice acted, with some surprising names in the cast, as well as for the music to be composed by Hiroki Kikuta, the composer for Secret of Mana. Now that's pretty damn impressive, and while $2.2 million isn't really a whole hell of a lot to work with when you compare it to other games, even when you compare it to other backer-funded projects, that's still quite a bit of cash to work with. I mean, Lord knows it's more than what I got in the bank right now. Even still, with games like Yooka-Laylee and Mighty Number 9, these were games that had massive budgets, yet they didn't exactly do very hot. Yet you have something like A Hat in Time that had a budget of roughly $200,000, and it turned out to be great. It's all about how you use your money. So did they use their budget to the best of their abilities, or is this just another backer-funded disappointment? This is a little game called Indivisible. Now, right off the bat, straight from the get-go, I have to say that I absolutely adore this game's art style. This is something that I've been yelling about for years. I love it when games have this 2D hand-drawn artwork like this. So many indie games use this retro 8-bit or 16-bit look, and it's to a point where it comes off as if they're using it as a crutch. You know, it's a lot easier and more cost-friendly to have, this retro look, so hey, why don't we save a buck and remind people of ye old glory days? Oh my god, do you remember the Nintendo? Oh my god, I know what that is! I mean, I don't know, like for some games I get it, like that's the point and it's fine when it's done well. Other games like Wargroove has this pixelated art style as well, but it goes above and beyond by having these buttery smooth animations. But in most cases, it comes off as shallow, cheap, and even disingenuous at times. Believe it or not, this is actually one of the major reasons why I decided to back this game. I wanted to see more games with this 2D hand-drawn artwork, and in that sense, this game did not disappoint. The design of these characters and the monsters are top-notch, and their animations are just mwah! Oh, they beautiful, they smooth as butter, they tighter than bark on a tree, you know what I'm saying? Now, admittedly, there's this one part in the game where you reach a port, and the NPCs are, they're different. I mean, I don't know. It looks like as if someone else drew up these characters, and it doesn't mesh very well, in my opinion. Some of these kind of look like DeviantArt OCs, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, mind you. Like, some of these are pretty cool designs, but the different art styles and the level of quality here clashes, and admittedly, it's a pinch distracting. Despite that, this game has a beautiful art style and the environments are nothing short of breathtaking. This game has a beautiful color palette. You're going to be exploring a number of places themed after countries far off to the east, and each area looks and feels distinct from one another. The building blocks are made up of polygons, so in that sense, it's kind of like the original Klonoa game on PlayStation, where you have these 2D sprites playing around on polygonal environments with the 2D camera. Wait, what's that shit called again? 2.5D? The music perfectly fits the environments to the T, with each area having its own atmosphere track for exploring, and some of them even have their own tracks for battling. I think it's pretty cool how you got some places that are distinct enough to where you just go there and has like its own battle theme. There's not one specific battle theme that you'll hear throughout the entire game, and I really appreciate that. I'm not going to oversell it and say that it's one of the best soundtracks that I've heard all year, but it's got its healthy share of bangers, it's good dosage of songs you can absolutely mellow out to, and there isn't really a track here that feels completely out of place. It's not the strongest OST I've ever heard in my life, but it's incredibly effective and does exactly what it needs to do. In some ways, I could say the same thing about the story. It's not great, but it is effective. The issue that I have is that it's riddled with cliches. Oh, look at this. You got a young, hyper-energetic, and optimistic, often hot-headed protagonist who, Oh, the poor thing, she never knew her mom. Oh, what a shame, her father dies really early on. Oh, look at that, we could check off the dead parents cliche. Oh, you got an evil, tyrannical overlord that wants to plummet the entire world into darkness? Okay, let's check that one off the list. Oh, wow, the main character having some sort of connection to some ancient end-of-the-world bringing monster? We've seen it, we've done it. It's nothing new. The beginning of this game admittedly left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. The village of the main protagonist gets burned down and her dad dies right in front of her eyes, but this all happens way too quick. If you want the player to feel some sort of impact, you've got to take the time for us to stop and smell the roses. You got to let us become a part of the village so we can grow attached to it. That way, when the village is destroyed, we actually feel it. The same goes for the death of her father. He puts her through a brief tutorial, they have a small argument, and then the entire village gets burned down, and then he dies. It's a fine, albeit overdone motivation to have the protagonist embark on her journey, but it feels rushed, and as a result, I didn't feel anything despite this game's best efforts. Games like Kingdom Hearts 2, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword got a lot of flack for spending too much time in the beginning area, but it worked for me because it took the time to show us why we should care about what happens to these places and these people. Skyward Sword especially worked for me, but you know, I'll get there when I get there, like 20 years from now, at this point. Again, the story isn't bad per se, it's not anything that we haven't seen before in terms of the basic plot structure. Of course, I'm not going to go into spoilers, seeing how this game is still pretty new, but just keep that in mind. Now, thankfully, the characters hold up the story in a way that keeps the adventure from ever feeling dull. I mean, I love these people, they're great! Each one of them has a really cool design, and their voices fit them well with some strong acting to boot, and each one of them has their own reasons for joining Ajna on her journey. Razmi is one of my favorite characters, not just in this game, but just in general. I love this woman. She's got a dry sense of humor, a constant humdrum expression on her face, and an unholy fascination with the macabre. Macabre? No, it's fucking macabre. Like bruh, like a bruh moment, fucking bruh. She doesn't ever really push the story forward. She's more of a comic relief character, if anything, but she often shows that despite her pessimistic outlook, she cares a great deal about Ajna and considers her a close friend. Now, with all of that being said, I gotta say that Dar is my favorite supporting character. He's the one who's responsible for the destruction of Ajna's village and the death of her father. You'd think that he'd be this game's rival character like what Darth Vader was to Luke, but sure enough, he somehow gets warped inside Ajna's head, and hey, look at that, he's a party member now. The two start off acting cold and nasty towards each other, understandably, but Dar eventually develops into something of an older brother figure to Ajna. His calm and collected attitude often clashes with Ajna's leap before you look spirit, and it makes for some great character moments for the both of them. Dar comes a long way from beginning to end, coming from destroying her village to fighting tooth and nail for her. As for our leading lady, no surprise here, she's actually pretty damn great. Unlike a lot of female characters nowadays, Ajna has these little things called flaws. She's ignorant, rude, selfish, impulsive, and she can be pretty mean. These traits actually have an effect on the story. It seems as if her actions, where she thinks to be doing the right thing, actually causes more harm than good. Then during a crucial point, she realizes that she's not perfect and has flaws, and then she owns up to it by doing the right thing. Again, I don't want to go into exactly why this happens because I'm trying to avoid like those massive spoilers. You know, I try not to get into this kind of stuff because, you know, I find it to be really toxic, but like in this day and age where we romanticize this idea of the strong female character, you know, the kinds that have no flaws and everyone likes them because they're just so darn good at everything that they do, or the kind of female characters who solely exist as a mouthpiece for the writer's toxic misandry. You know, in this culture where we have to force female characters to be badass or icons of progress or whatever, it's refreshing to see a strong female character who is, you know, a character. She has flaws, but it's those flaws that make her hero's journey so empowering to watch. When you see her hit her lowest lows, you want to see her get back up because we, the viewer, the player, the reader, we connect with those characters through those flaws. It's what separates the timeless and beloved characters from those products of the times. Even still, Ajna's optimistic and eager traits are nothing short of infectious and lead to many entertaining and downright hilarious moments. This is helped by this game's stellar writing. It's witty, it's tongue-in-cheek, but it never comes off as Looney Tunes or cringy. You know what I mean? There are stakes, and the characters react to the situations that they're thrusted in appropriately, but in the calm before the storm, they take time to have a little fun and even poke fun at themselves.
That's the spirit. Resign yourself to your fate. Hop into my brain. Hop into your... what?
The morals and themes of this game fit perfectly with the setting, again, which are environments themed after countries from the East, most notably places like India and even Japan. Okay, well, maybe not Japan exclusively, like you could definitely see some inspiration from China and Vietnam and the Philippines here in Tai Krung, but Naga Rider? Naga freaking Rider? Come on, that's like one of the most Japanese things I've seen. So concepts like reincarnation, life after death, these kind of subjects are tackled in a tasteful and fascinating way. And of course, again, you have Ajna coming to grips with her imperfections. That was a very satisfying character arc for her. Yes, the plot is cliched, but don't let anyone tell you that it's not interesting or that it's boring. I get the impression that the team had a vision and a story that they wanted to tell, and they definitely do put in the effort to make it stick with you. You can tell that they wanted you to pay attention to the story thanks to the solid vocal performances. With some of these characters, it is a tad distracting once when you know who these actors are. Like, no, that ain't Zabate, that's Crom! But in all seriousness, the acting here is great. You can definitely tell that the actors had a good time delivering some of these lines, and I get the impression that they cared about their jobs. Nothing feels forced or phoned in or anything. It feels and sounds genuine, and that's all I could ever ask. So first impressions are strong with this game, but what exactly do you do here? This game is actually a kind of amalgamation between different genres. You got acrobatic platforming, Metroidvania-like exploration, a mix between turn-based and action RPG mechanics, and even some mechanics that you see in some competitive fighting games. You know, it's kind of fitting seeing how the folks behind this game also made Skullgirls, so, you know, I guess that makes a bit more sense. Also, especially in terms of the character designs, Lab Zero loves their ladies.
What? Is it the Iron Kingdom?
Pretty lady.
Now, you'd think that mixing in all of these genres that, you know, at first thought, they really don't have all that much in common with each other, but I'm happy to say that the folks at Lab Zero did a pretty damn good job. It's far from perfect, and I'll get into why that is later, but what we have here works remarkably well. First, I want to get some of the technical mumbo-jumbo out of the way. I played this on the Xbox One, and the optimization was sort of all over the damn place. Like, there were times where it looked like as if it was running at a smooth 60 FPS, but then when things got kind of crazy, or if you start moving too fast, the frame rate drops pretty hard. Loading screens can be pretty bad too. The environments that you're going to be exploring are massive and rich in detail, so I understand why that is, but either way, the loading screens are pretty bad. There were also a handful of moments where I guess I was moving too fast in the game and it would have a hard time loading the next chunk of the environments, and at one time it even just straight up crashed my game. This didn't happen terribly often, but it was more than once, and it was more than enough times to make me take notice. Depending on when you're watching this, it's possible that they've since patched the game and ironed out the bugs, but it's worth bringing up just in case if you want to jump into this game as soon as possible. This game has multiple save points scattered throughout each map, so let's say you save your game, then you turn your game off. When you boot your game back up, the title screen will be where you last left off, so all you have to do is just press start and then bam, you're in control just like that. That's probably why the game takes so long to load when you first boot up the game, but it's a really cool feature. And thankfully, there are a lot of save points because, and I need to make this perfectly clear, these environments are massive. On the one hand, your first time running through these places are going to be an absolute blast. Ajna controls beautifully, and she has a pretty decent move pool right from the beginning, and as you'd expect from games from the genre, you gain even more powerful skills that let you just plow right through these environments. The platforming here is top-notch and is well designed and open for experimentation. You might see a ring cell, we'll talk about those in just a moment, that seems a little too far out of reach, or one that seems incredibly difficult to nab. Well, with enough understanding of Ajna's control, as well as a pinch of experimentation, there's a good chance you can just nab it. Now, something that you need to keep in mind is that I am in no way, shape, or form an expert on the Metroidvania genre. Well, if I'm honest, I'm not really an expert on anything, but that's besides the point. I've played maybe a handful of Metroid games before, and that one Bloodstained game that came out earlier this year, and that's really just about it. But not once did I ever think about the platforming in those games. My attention was mostly on the exploration and finding new gear and equipment. Now, I'm not trying to oversell Indivisible by saying that it has the greatest platforming in the entire genre, or anything like that. More so that the platforming was so well designed and that the controls worked perfectly with what the designers had laid out that it was hard to not notice. These platforming challenges make great use of the multiple and creative skills that you'll acquire, and the endgame will literally put everything that you've learned to the test. It's difficult, it can be a little confusing, and even a tad frustrating, but overcoming these challenges was immensely satisfying. Now, on the other hand, I can't say that I was the biggest fan of the way how you acquired new skills, and I'm putting big quotes around this, equipment. You'll know why I'm putting the quotes on equipment, you'll know why I want to get there, so just bear with me. With other games in the genre, you'd find new tools and equipment by exploring, but in Indivisible, these are just handed out to you by party members after you reach a certain part of the story, or Ajna will just kind of pull up a new skill from thin air. The tools and abilities that are fun to use, but that satisfaction that you'll find in other games isn't here, in my opinion. Something else you might find a bit strange if you're a fan of this genre is that this game isn't about giving you that feeling of complete isolation and loneliness that you'd find in a Metroid game. Indivisible is story-driven and character-focused. You have a party with you at all times that continues to expand the further along that you go. If they come across something strange, they'll chime in and give you their 2 cents on the situation. Even some of the later areas that you'll explore are going to be cities that have those glorious NPCs that I've talked about before. There's a feeling of fear and dread they can have while playing a Metroidvania. That feeling of not knowing what's on the other side of that door, and that fear is amplified thanks to the isolation. That feeling isn't ever here in Indivisible. And to clarify, I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, just stating that it's something different than most games from the genre. But one thing that I will say that's pretty lousy is that there isn't a way to fast travel. Again, the environments in this game are massive, so when there's a point where you have to explore a good chunk of the map, and then the game tells you to go back to the beginning of the map, you're gonna have to make that trip manually. If there was a way to warp between save points, that would greatly soften the blow, but no such system is in place. This is especially offensive because there's one point in this game where you are forced to backtrack. After you clear that port area I was talking about before, you're given a ship and you can now pick between 3 locations to fully explore, right? It sounds pretty cool, the game's starting to open up, you're wrong! In each of these areas, you're going to learn a skill that will allow you to explore the next area more thoroughly. So in my playthrough, I went to Tai Krung, but then I hit a roadblock and then I was told to go somewhere else. Okay, so I went to the Iron Kingdom and what do you know? Same thing happened to me. I was exploring the place and then I hit a roadblock, then I was told to go back. Ay. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, there's one more place I could possibly go. This has to be it. And yeah, I went the right way. But get this, if you pick this area first, you're still going to have to backtrack. There's a skill that you learn in the Iron Kingdom that lets you slide through these elevated gaps. So the ideal path is that you go to the Iron Kingdom first to learn the skill, then you have to go back, then you gotta go to Kanul, clear that area, and then go to Tai Krung. Forced backtracking plus no fast travel equals a bad time. Now, to be fair, this is the only time it ever happens in the entire game. There's still plenty of game left after this point, but it's still inexcusable. So hopefully at this point I've made it clear that this game isn't like your typical Metroidvania, but in that sense, this game isn't like your typical RPG as well. Now sure, you got managing your team, you got beating enemies and gaining EXP and leveling up, but that's really as far as it goes. For starters, you don't get any items or armor or potions or elixirs or equipment or none of that. Like sure, you'll find an axe that lets you climb walls, you get a little spear that lets you launch yourself in the air and then climb through ceilings, but that's really all you get. Now on paper, this sounds like sacrilege, but in practice, it works really well. And with enough refinement and polish, this can end up being one of my favorite battle systems in any RPG. So you might be wondering if this game doesn't have any gear or equipment, what exactly does it have? That's where the ring cells come in. Once when you've collected enough of these, you can either increase your offensive or defensive capabilities. Some of these are just kind of handed to you, which is lame, but more often than not, they're going to be your reward for clearing an obstacle challenge or just running off the beaten path. You can have up to 4 party members at a time, and each character is relegated to a button on the controller. To attack with the character, you just have to press the button that they're assigned to. This can take some getting used to if this is your first time playing, but after a while, you'll get the hang of it. Now as such, I found the beginning parts of this game to be pretty difficult because I had to get myself reacquainted with the layout of this game from when I played the demo almost 5 years ago. Jesus Christ, has it really been that long? But after a while, you will get used to it and you'll be pulling off sick combos in no time. Each character has 3 different types of attacks. You have your basic attacks for when you're just tapping the button, but you also have new moves whether or not you tilt the analog stick or D-pad up or down. Depending on the character, holding up while attacking can launch the enemy in the air, and holding down will ground them. Some characters can even give your party buffs and even heal your party depending on the direction that you hold. This, I feel, is one of Indivisible's greatest strengths. Each character feels completely unique from one another. Every time I got a new party member, I would put them in just to see how they'd play and how it could affect my playstyle. I've said before that I prefer my RPGs and JRPGs to have a smaller, more focused party. With something like Golden Sun or the Mother games, it feels as if each member of your party is there for a reason and a function, so each member feels valuable to the team. When you have too many choices, it could be overwhelming and it could really screw you over if you haven't been using a certain character, and the game just forces you to put this character that you never used, and then, oh hey, look at that, you hit a roadblock, go back and grind, I guess. Thanks, Shining Resonance, I'm still feeling it. But the way how the battles are, I felt encouraged to mix and match, and while I didn't try out all of the characters, I couldn't help but grow attached to them. Starting out, you and your party will only be able to attack once, but the further along you get into the game, you can attack even more, giving you the ability to rack up combos. You even have this nifty little special move meter where, once when it's filled, you can do one of two things. You can either spend chunks of that meter to unleash a character special attack, of which they have 3 per character, or you can spend all of your meter to revive any fallen party members and heal whoever is still alive. It's a battle system that, while it can feel pretty button mashy at times, has a lot of depth and is really satisfying once when you've learned how it works. Now, one thing that is absolutely crucial that you learn is blocking. Right before an enemy is about to attack a party member, if you press the button that's associated with that character, they'll block the attack. But if you do it at just the right time, they'll gain some health back. And look, I'm not going to spoil anything here, but you need to get this down pat for the final boss. It is literally life or death. Honestly, I'm kind of glad this game doesn't have any sort of inventory whatsoever. With the amount of characters that join you, managing them and managing their inventories would have been a complete nightmare. With that said, I do have a couple of gripes with this game. When all said and done, this game is pretty damn easy. There aren't any game overs in this game, so if you were to die to a boss, you just get brought back a couple of spaces away from the boss to try again. You know, which is nice. The game's pretty forgiving in that sense, and the same is applied for when you're platforming. If you fall into a bed of spikes or a bottomless pit, you'll just be brought back to the nearest checkpoint to try again. Save points are also very, very easy to come by, and after every battle, your party will have their health fully restored. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a big dumb gamer baby. You know, when I play games, I usually start on the easier options just to get myself familiar with the game, and if I like the game enough, you know, then I'll turn the difficulty up a notch on repeated playthroughs. Also, as some of you may know, I suck at video games. A little fun fact about me. But if I messed up, I'm not against being punished. You know, the issue with this game is that there really isn't any punishment for failure. I mean, I don't know, guys. I kind of breezed past all of these battles. I mean, the bosses were really cool. Like, I like how with some of these guys, you know, they would switch between the turn-based system, and then you have to actually run around and then dodge the attacks. I thought that was a lot of fun, and it kept me on my toes. And while some of these guys weren't necessarily pushovers, I can't say that I ever felt threatened by them or that I was afraid I would lose the battle. If this game had different difficulty options, then I'm sure that would help. But the thing is with this game is that once when you have the optimal party, there really isn't a reason to experiment with the other characters besides your own curiosity. Now sure, some of these characters will have a better time handling certain enemies than others, but there isn't anything stopping you from just swapping them back out once when you're done. Again, it's just part of the reason why I like to have a smaller, more focused party. The second issue I have in terms of the battles is that enemies tend to have a lot of health, so if you find yourself in a situation where you're forced to backtrack, there's a good chance you're going to be stopped to battle. Now, granted, there aren't any random encounters, and if you know what you're doing, it's pretty easy to avoid a lot of these fights, but the point still stands that when you're backtracking and then you find yourself in a battle, you're going to be there for a while, especially seeing how you can't run away from battles. I know, it's kind of weird how I'm saying that the game is too easy, yet the enemies have too much health, but it's more so that after a while, these battles can get pretty tedious. If the enemies had less health but put up more of a fight, or if it made me think more carefully about who would stay in my party, then sure, that'd work. But as it stands, despite me actually enjoying the battle system quite a bit, the enemies never really did put up much of a fight, and the battles tend to last longer than I'd like. At the same time, it's not as if any of the problems that I have killed the game for me. Like, sure, the story's cliche and trope heavy at points, but the wonderful cast of characters, as well as the setting, writing, and solid vocal performances make the story worth experiencing. Sure, there are long load times and weird frame rate drops and weird glitches every once in a while, but this game has beautiful environments and the hand-drawn sprites goes a long way towards giving this game an identity. Backtracking can be a pain, but the act of moving around and using your tools to the best of your abilities is rewarding. Battles can take too long, but the combat is engaging and always kept my attention. This game is obviously flawed and is far from perfect, but at the same time, and while I know this wasn't the point, it fits with the themes this game tries to convey. Like, nothing is perfect, and the flaws can make you appreciate that one thing even more. They're perfect imperfections, and it makes it worth experiencing. If something was perfect, then what would be the point? You know, like, there'd be nothing to learn, no room to grow. And that's kind of why we're here, you know? We learn from our mistakes, and we do what we can to become better people and live the best lives that we possibly can. Now, I'm not excusing this game's faults by saying, but that's the point! No. Problems are problems, and problems were meant to be fixed. It's more so that after my first playthrough, I can appreciate the game that much more because it was flawed. I also gotta give credit to Lab Zero, you know, coming off of a fighting game to making this weird, strange mixture of genres. It could not have been easy, especially if that 4-year wait from its campaign to its release is anything to go off of. But just by playing the game, you can tell that these people loved what they were making and that they had a vision they wanted to see through. I noticed that a lot of these crowdfunded games tend to replicate the success of other more well-known games. Again, you know, you got not Castlevania, not Banjo-Kazooie, not Mega Man. These were games that were made by the original creators, well, kind of, and they were made seemingly because their original publishers didn't have faith in their ideas. So they would make these games to kind of, God, I don't know, like, I guess stick it to the man. And, well, look how it turned out. I'm not saying these games are bad because they appeal to nostalgia. I actually quite enjoyed myself with Bloodstained. I'm more so saying that, in a way, they don't have an identity because they're trying too hard to capitalize on their previous successes as opposed to doing something new. And on the other side of that coin, we also have games that were made by the fans that try to recapture some of that magic. Again, with something like Wargroove or A Hat in Time. With those games, it feels more genuine, like as if they're making these kind of games because they're passionate about their respective genres, and in some ways, these games kind of feel like a tribute or as a way to pay respect. I feel as if Indivisible falls under this category. Like, if you're really into the lesser-known PS1 RPGs, then you might recognize the battle system, seeing how it looks very similar to Valkyrie Profile. Now, in fairness, I can't say how this game compares to the games that it's pulling from, seeing how I haven't played it. Now look, if I was playing any kind of RPG, it was going to be on the Game Boy Advance or the Nintendo DS. Like, my options back then was very, very limited. What I can say is that while it pulls inspiration from other genres and games, it does so in a way that makes it stand out. I couldn't be more proud to back this game, and the fact that it even exists, the fact that I can play it, makes me genuinely happy. I have a weird feeling that this game is going to go under a lot of people's radars, but if this game looks appealing to you in any way, I strongly encourage you to try it out. Again, I can't stress this enough. It's far from perfect, and I can't compare it to the other games that it pulls inspiration from, but it does what it sets out to do rather well, and it's just brimming with passion and care. Thank you, Lab Zero. Thank you for making this great game. It was definitely worth the wait, and I can't wait to see what you have next.
1, 2